Dude and Grim Show presents Scratch a Track,
the podcast where we debate which track to scratch off some of the most known and unknown albums of all time.
We live in an era of singles.
This is an album.
People no longer listen to an album for the work it truly is.
It kind of defines a band.
It's just not something that people relate to nowadays.
We've all gotten the dreaded.
It started out as a game.
Which track on the album would you scratch out if you had to? Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Scratch a Track podcast presented by the Dude and Grim Show. I am the Dude.
And I'm Grim, and today we are going to talk about the album Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And I think, Graham, we just want to remind people before we get all up in this to like and subscribe and comment. We are on your favorite podcasting platform because we're on all the major ones. And we're also on YouTube if you want to see our smiling faces. So just, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And
please.
Let us know, play along. Let us know what track you guys would scratch off the album. And you can't say we wouldn't, it's perfect. We wouldn't want to scratch any because that's not how the game's played.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's
like
a game.
Sometimes we don't want to scratch any either, right? Like we just don't.
Most times.
Most times.
In all honesty.
This one, and dude, I'll admit this one was tough for me. I mean, it is only 8 songs, but it was a tough one for me to scratch.
Yeah. Most of them are for me. But again, like you said, that's not really the construct of the game that we kind of came up with here. So.
All right. So getting into a little bit of Raw Power here, my friend. So this is their 3rd studio album.
Yep.
Released February 7th, 1973, man.
And the band was kind of in some turmoil at this time.
Yeah, that's to say the very least. I think they had broken up. One of them was like an alcoholic. Iggy was going through his heroin addiction stage.
Yep.
And it wasn't the most stable time for the band. I think you could say that.
Oh, yeah. And as far as I am aware, I believe that they got a new guitarist at this time, not to replace anyone, but it was James Williamson, or maybe he did replace someone. Oh, because no. I'm sorry, the Ashton brothers were bass and then drums.
Yeah. So one of the Ashton brothers actually was the lead guitar player. And they actually moved him over to bass, and James Williamson came in to play guitar.
Okay,
and
that makes sense.
And so, and actually on this album, Williamson actually co-wrote I think all of the songs or most of the songs with Iggy.
Yeah,
which I think hadn't really been done before. And from I must fully admit, I'm not a super fan. I am not as familiar with a lot of their work, but I'll tell you what, dude. When I first put this album on, like I was like, oh shit, like I loved it, man. And I'd never really heard it much before. And I after listening to it, I had heard like a few songs here and there, but I couldn't have told you, oh, it's off this album or anything. I mean, it was Iggy Pop, but I couldn't have told you that. So it really struck a chord in me.
I would assume you heard something of Search and Destroy. That's pretty popular.
Yeah, Search and Destroy, and I want to say Gimme Danger was pretty familiar as well. Almost like I had seen it. It had been like in a show or it had been in a movie or something like that. But when I looked up, it was hard because I tried to look up is Gimme Danger like in a movie, and you Google that and you get the documentary about Iggy and the Stooges called Gimme Danger. I think that's a little.
Did you watch that?
I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
That's really, I've watched it. It's quite good.
Dude, I want to see. Yeah, I do really want to see it. Really want to see it. But so kind of going back to James Williamson. So I kind of read when he was, or I saw some little kind of documentary, or maybe I read this. I don't remember. It was one or the other. But a lot of these songs, when he was kind of writing them, he was just like writing them in his room at night, and he actually wrote a lot of the guitar parts and riffs. He'd just be sitting in his room on his acoustic guitar. And I found that really interesting because, most of the album is pretty raw, no pun intended. But I also really liked how on a couple of the tracks, they incorporated the acoustic guitar. And for me, when listening to that kind of the first time on this album, I was really surprised because I had I had a preconceived notion about, punk and Iggy and the Stooges, and when I heard the acoustic guitar and stuff on some of the songs, it kind of caught me off guard, and I loved it because I love the contrast and the way they kind of play off each other and everything.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't have a personal shout out for this record. I think I kind of came into it more, I guess back in the days when I would listen to Pandora, there was probably a station or something that I had on, and the Stooges came on, and I liked them. So then you kind of dive into their catalog and check them out. And I mean, I like the self-titled first album and Funhouse, but this one always struck me a little more. And I think it's important to note that I know that they say that this album's considered an influential forerunner to punk rock, but
yeah,
I guess I would argue that it was probably the first record that had anything that introduced punk rock to anyone, because I think Search and Destroy is in my mind, it's the first punk song.
Yeah. So I'll say for me, it was interesting because I have not listened to a lot of punk. And really, when I listened to this album, I felt maybe it was kind of like the beginning and the ultimate punk, but I feel like at least what I've heard, to me, this sounded more just like regular rock. But I will say the way he sings it, again, I say the rawness, but a lot of the distortion and everything. There was something about it, though, that there's some songs where he does carry a little bit of melody, or the guitar has kind of that feel. And I feel like when it kind of goes in that direction, for me, it drifts a little bit from punk. But that's just kind of my
I would absolutely
opinion,
agree with you. But I mean, just listening to Search and Destroy, I mean, just the way that the chord structure of the song, the way it's presented, I just like the way it just kind of attacks, I guess.
Dude, that's pretty, yeah. I mean, we'll get into that track, but that is... to me, that's the way I could describe this whole album. It just attacks you. It's, almost very similar how our previous, I think, episode or scratch we just did with Run the Jewels, how that album kind of attacks you in its own way, in its own genre.
In its own way. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was very, very kind of prevalent to me. But yeah, we were kind of talking about how the band was really in disarray when all this was happening, and David Bowie was a very influential figure. Not only I think he did an intervention with Iggy in his heroin addiction, but then he also came in to help mix the album, because basically they had kind of recorded it, and Iggy tried to mix it himself, and the record company was not having it. And I don't know if we want to get in. I don't know if we want to. We can talk about this maybe a little bit. There are a variety, it seems like, of mixes of this album that have been done throughout the year. There's Iggy's initial mix, which I think came out as a bootleg, and they ended up calling it Rough Power or something like that. Have you heard that? That has made it out as a bootleg, I think.
I haven't listened to that, but I did read about it, and I did read that other people tried to do remixes of the album as well. But one thing that I've wanted to talk about is so a couple things. So first, this version of the vinyl right here, I believe, is the 2012 Record Store Day vinyl re-release. So this album has two vinyls in it, and the first one is the David Bowie mix, And then the
that's what
second
you got.
one
Okay.
is the 97 Iggy Pop remix.
Okay.
So it has both of them. And I read what I guess Bowie and I know one of the Ashton brothers said about the Iggy Pop remix, and there were not what I'd call overly positive reviews from both the band or necessarily Bowie about it. Which I get, but I kind of like Iggy Pop's remix because I think it adds a little fuzz in certain areas. And I know they talk about like every little guitar riff, maybe some that were pulled out, and every grunt that he did, he put back in there, and they didn't like that. That didn't grab me as much as just the overall sound. I felt that, maybe it wasn't as hollow, and no discredit to Bowie in the way he mixed that, because who would I be to do that? But aside from that, Bowie, aside from that, it's just like, and we'll get into this when we get into the recording, but there wasn't a lot that he had to work with. But one thing that I've noticed is that his mix sounds a little hollow to me, in the sense that I don't hear as much of the drums as I'd like and as much of the bass. Now, not to say he didn't have a nearly insurmountable challenge in doing so based on the way that Iggy Pop recorded it in the first attempt, because that is ouch.
Yeah. I think they said that he ended up mixing it with the instruments in one stereo channel and then the vocals into the other,
and then a guitar and then guitar solos on a third. So it's like in this album, he had the ability to go in and use, I would say let's say a minimum of 16 tracks. I think when Bowie did it, he brought it onto a 24 track system.
Yep. That's what it was. Yeah.
So let's say they had 24 tracks and they used three. Like, it's amazing they got out of it what they did.
It's got to be like the first band in the history of time, because I feel like every time we do an episode like this and we talk about bands who want more and more layers and everything, they're always continuing to like mix down, right? And mix down into separate tracks and everything. And he kind of went the opposite direction here. I was shocked when I read that.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I guess this is as good a time as any to get into the recording bit of it. But yeah, I guess it was done primarily in London, and there was a staff at the studio that they did it in. And I don't know what engineer in their right mind would have allowed that. And another thing that I think was interesting is in whatever studio they did at least a handful of these, and I think they mentioned 5 songs. And as I listened to it, the ones that I think you can hear that on would be Search and Destroy, Raw Power, Shake Appeal, Death Trip, and probably Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell. Those are the ones to me that sound like they came out of those sessions where they just used those 3 tracks, because there's some similarity or congruence to the sound of those that you can just hear. And it's, in a way, it's cool because it comes out more sounding like real DIY punk. Like, I got nothing to work with, we just made an awesome live recording. It seems like that a lot. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think when they were recording it though, because like they had, like, do you think they maybe kind of recorded, he put all those parts like on single tracks, and they were just gonna like mix it together and put it out as like a mono? Because if you were gonna do it that way, then I mean that kind of, it makes sense. You could put all those instruments on one track and then the next one and the next one, if you're not worried about stereo and kind of panning or anything like that. It's sure. Like, boom, here it goes.
But I mean, even forget stereo. I mean, if you had a 4-track recorder, I think at least you would have done like the drums on one, maybe if you had to, guitar and bass on another, vocals, and then like the solos, but they didn't do that. It was like all the instrumentation was on that one. And I don't know if they mixed anything down. And if they did, you could argue that a little more care could have been taken for like the drums. Cause that's one thing that I notice is I'd like the drums to really crush more. The guitars are pretty loud, but I don't feel like I hear enough bass.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in you're talking about in the original mix, or because like in Iggy's mix,
even in Iggy's mix, I mean, there's he does some things in his remix to kind of account for that a little bit, and I don't know if that was layering that one track several times, and then in each one of those instances, you kind of EQ it and compress it in a way that would be favorable to whatever the given instrument you want to bring out is. So at least you can kind of get more of the full spectrum of EQ out of what you have. Sure. Just say if that makes sense.
Well, it does. It's so funny that I don't know if we've done or talked about an album that has almost gone through almost so many iterations.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, and for being like that, you know, this kind of, I don't know if I'd say prestigious, but well-known, highly, you know, rated, considered album, like historical, I guess.
I think that's a good caveat there, is historically speaking, because I don't know that a lot of attention got paid to this when it came out. It seems more of like a in retrospect type of albums. I mean, when I look at the people who've talked about this, I mean, Kurt Cobain said it was one of his favorite albums of all time. Dude, CeeLo Green was cited as saying that.
I know, right?
Yeah. But he did say one thing. He's like, it seems like it was all done in one take, which you can see why he would have made that comment.
Absolutely. No, you definitely can. Well, so obviously his initial mix, record company didn't dig it. And then so they had Bowie come in and work with him to remix the album. Basically, they just remixed it like 7 songs, I think, in one day. And the way Iggy described it was basically like him and Bowie in this kind of old, crappy studio with an old school console and everything,
like an Elvis era console.
Yeah,
where it's
that's
like,
what they said. Yeah,
it's not even. I don't know if you can see this, but you can't see my mixing board. But it's not even with like modern day faders. It's like these knobs, like real.
And he said, they would just, to mix it, they each had their just hands on the knobs, and they were just like adjusting it kind of like on the way and stuff, like on the fly. And I when I listen to the Bowie mix, I feel like there's certain parts of it where you can really hear them turning up and turning down certain parts and everything. It's like it's a performance like in itself, pretty much.
And a lot of people would have said that about especially like analog mixing sessions, because today it's all done digitally and you can save your progress. But back then it was a performance. And I think one of the things that tuned me into that was watching the
Dark Side, right?
Yes, the Dark Side documentary where Alan Parsons was talking about how mixing this was a performance in itself, because it was very complicated for analog equipment. Now this is a different animal, so to speak. Yeah. But I do feel that in that mix, there's times where the vocal stands out to me maybe a little more than I would want or seems natural.
I feel like sort of there is, some of the balance is maybe off. Where there are, like, I think you said hollow, like there's kind of some thin spots where it just kind of, the song's going and then something comes up a little, maybe, I don't know if it's higher than it should, but at least when I'm listening to it, compared to the Iggy version of the 90s, that's what really stands out to me. Whereas his version it's just more full. I feel like it's more there.
Yes, it is.
And it's definitely, his version is definitely crunchier. There's a lot more grit, and I think they even said like he purposely did it so it's many parts would actually peak and crunch and everything.
Yeah, but at the same time, when they remastered it, any clipping was gotten rid of, and that's another thing. I know I kind of touched on the whole bit about the loudness wars, but and I've probably talked about this in other episodes, but there's this idea or this thing that's happening in music where some producers and mastering engineers feel that the idea is they want to put out the loudest album possible. Like it's pushing all the way all the time, but it doesn't
going
peak.
to 11, baby. But
it doesn't peak. And when I was reading an article about this, they actually cited the remastered version of Search and Destroy as like the loudest song that had been mixed. And they show the waveforms. And if you look at waveforms of songs, they kind of go up and down, and there's quieter parts and louder parts.
Peaks and valleys, right? Yeah.
Yes. But when they showed the waveform for the remastered version, it was like a solid bar all the way through the song, like just all the way up all the time. No middle ground. And the song is like that. I mean, it's not as if, there's the quiet part of Search and Destroy, but it struck me reading that article and actually seeing the waveform for comparison, because it's just all the way up all the time.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
But really they did say that when they remixed it and remastered it, that it was arguably the loudest album ever, coming in at an RMS of -4 dB, which is rare even by today's standards.
Yeah, right.
And
I saw that.
There's different ways to kind of measure overall volume, and I am not an expert on peak leveling versus RMS, but all I know is that from the limited knowledge I do have is that if you set something to like a -2 dB peak, that's the loudest anything will reach. But if you set something to 2 dB RMS, it's basically like the standard throughout the song. And so this thing is just like, it just is like screaming at you the whole time.
So it basically moves everything to that level? Is that kind of, or?
That kind of, I guess the way to think of it is that becomes the average level for everything. But they'll still set a peak limit to which things can't go over so that it won't clip in your stereo, and you won't get that noticeable, like,
Yeah. We all love that.
But that's nerd talk, but yeah. And I don't claim to be an expert, so don't chastise me over that one.
No. Or do it. Whatever. Rip them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Rip.
So this album came out, and actually critics seemed to like it, but it just didn't do well. Like listeners just weren't about it really. And so Columbia ended up dropping them from their contract, and so did Main Man, because apparently a lot of the money that they were advanced, they just spent on drugs.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But
not the first or last band to do that.
No.
But I can see, I mean, you got to admit, I think if this album had come out in even 75, when you had like the beginnings of what would become punk, it would have been like more accepted. But I mean, think about what else was coming out in 72 73.
74. Well, this is what was coming out. Led Zeppelin's House of the Holy, The Who's Quadrophenia, and the Rolling Stones' Goat's Head Soup. Probably the three biggest bands at that time in this, I guess, in sort of a rock kind of genre, you would want to say.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Those are the albums that came out. This was just so much grittier than any of those.
Oh man, yeah. I mean that's why I don't think it's fair to call it like this predecessor to punk. I mean, I feel like it was not only in the sound of not all the songs, but a lot of the songs, but in the spirit too. Like just in the spirit of it, like how it felt, how it was recorded, like everything about it.
Yeah. I mean, Maybe that's something that, now that I think about it, is actually kind of cool that it was completely mixed wrong. It was just kind of a mess. Like,
it was mixed
in a
wrong.
weird, yeah, it was mixed wrong. It's in doubly. Yeah. So,
Dolby.
Dolby. Anyways, so yeah, many of the, like I said, critics actually did like it for the most part, but it just didn't do well commercially. They got drops, but it is one of those albums, kind of like Marvin Gaye's like What's Going On, that people have looked back at and really, really praised it. So Pitchfork named it the 83rd best album of the 70s. Rolling Stone has it ranked at 125 of their greatest 500 albums. So
yeah,
those are pretty good lists to be on.
I just don't think, especially given the time, there was anything like it at all. It was its own animal.
Yes.
I mean, it really was.
So I think we should maybe get into the album a little bit here now. I think we should definitely say, though, that I think the mix that we've agreed that we are going to talk about is the Iggy Pop remix from the 90s, right? That's... Yeah,
I mean, dude, I've listened to both a number of times. I mean, the vinyl that I have has both of them, and I've listened to both, and I've also read the statements that I think the Ashtons and David Bowie have put out, and I know that the Ashtons were basically like, boy, this is really kind of like no good. I think people are going to listen to this and say, man, I really like the original mix better. I guess to me, I don't hear the hugest difference in like, oh man, that shouldn't be there or that shouldn't be there. I know that there are things, there are little guitar artifacts, there are vocal artifacts, but I felt like the Iggy one captured more of what the title says, which was raw power. I mean, he added a little grit, he added a little thickness, and I guess if it's up to me, that's the one I would choose to listen to, but not in any way to discredit the Bowie mix that was the original release.
Sure. Well, and I think the tough thing that comes along with that is, this album came out in 74. So then like the new like 20 plus years later, the new remix version.
Sorry. What? February 7th of 73.
Oh, well, 73. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
Sorry.
Trivial.
Fuck me. 1 year. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Only 12 months, dude. Come on.
Dude.
And I mean, in history, that's not even the blink of an eye.
It's not even. So anyways, like I was saying, it's when people have had an album and that's the version they've been listening to for years and years and years. And then you hear the new one. I find myself like with movies, like when sometimes director's cuts or extended versions come out and you're
Makes
like,
sense.
I will say, hey, it's kind of cool to see those extra scenes. But a lot of times I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad they cut it out or they cut it out for a reason. And like, hey, I appreciate Apocalypse Now, the Redux. I do.
I'm glad you brought that up because go on.
Like the now there's another one, the final cut. It's like Coppola's real version that he would want, which it has some of the scenes from the Redux and I watched them. I've seen them both a few times, and I'm just like, I always go back to like the original version that I grew up with, and that's that. So,
dude, the French plantation scene just takes too long.
Just drags it out. It just.
I do like the scene where they go back to the USO, and it's just all in disarray and everything, because you kind of feel like that.
Was that during like the hurricane or the monsoon?
Yeah,
the helicopters tipped over. Yeah, but that scene isn't like that long. Like the French plantation scene, they're there for like, dude, that adds like another 25 minutes, I think, to the movie.
You can only imagine how much it affected the cost of production for that scene.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's funny because in Hearts of Darkness, he's like, I cut the scene because he's like, I didn't like the lighting, I didn't like the acting, I didn't like anything about it. So it's like, well, I'm going to put it back in during the new versions. I don't know.
I don't know.
So
I don't know.
Anyways, so we'll move on from Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, but I do think that I see the comparison between that and like a director's cut or something. But I guess I felt like with the two mixes, they didn't add that much more. It's not like they added songs in that weren't there before. They just, little tweaks here and there. And another thing I did.
It's like adjusting the color. It's like taking out the specs. And
Another thing I do want to say before we get too into it is, so the band was still playing like during, I guess, and after this. And you'll see, if you look at the Iggy and the Stooges chronology, there is something that came out after this called Metallic KO.
Okay.
Which you can also find as like a remastered version called More Power. And there's a group of songs on there that I think are really good. And if you like the Stooges, I would really recommend listening to it. And I feel like those songs are what was next, but they just never happened. But they have some cool versions of them, and it's worth a listen. And they do some in that series of songs, which I think were primarily taken from like maybe live in studio or live outside of the studio recordings. They do some cuts from Raw Power too.
Sweet.
So
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
If you want to get your Iggy and the Stooges on, sorry.
And by the way, Iggy was born in our hometown, just Muskegon, Michigan.
No way.
Yeah, he was born in Muskegon, Michigan, and then his family moved to Ann Arbor after that, and he kind of grew up in Ann Arbor, and then the Stooges formed out of Detroit. But Iggy was born in Muskegon, just like you and I, Cole's garlic bread, and all the wonderful
Larry's
people.
mashed potatoes.
I don't think those are from Muskegon.
Probably not. Probably not.
Should
but
be.
anyway, but we did like those a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Iggy's going to have some competition because once we get famous, we're going to be the most famous people from Muskegon. So
yeah,
watch out, Iggy. We're coming for you.
In a good way.
In a good way. Yeah. All right, bro. Do you want to get into the album here? I think we're about ready.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, cool, man. Well, let's get into the first track, which we have discussed a little bit already, and that is Search and Destroy, which is the first single off the album. Oh, it's, I think like we said, it hits, man. Like this is you know what you're going to get into. Like once you put this on, you're like, wow.
First punk song ever, in my opinion. Awesome. It does not get old to me. It really doesn't.
So I was watching there's little snippets of a documentary. So if you get I think it's the legacy version of the CD, and I think it's like a double disc, but you have to get the actual CD. I think there is included a documentary on this album, and I think parts of it were ripped and made its way up to YouTube, although you can't watch all of them. And I believe it's during this song, Iggy talks about writing the lyrics for it, and he says he was in the middle of writing the lyrics when he OD'd. He woke up 14 hours later, and then he finished writing the song.
Wow. That's even better than like Keith Richards' account of the guitar riff from Satisfaction where he just passed out.
Yeah, this is next level shit. So,
wow.
But yeah, I mean, this song from a musical perspective, dude, the guitars just scream. Like it is. And I feel like this is actually one of the tracks where maybe it's just a guitar where I felt like I could actually hear the bass a lot, because I know we've said that maybe the bass is a little lower. There's something there that just has a shit ton of fuzz on it, and maybe that I don't know if that's the bass or not, but it sounded like it was to me.
Well, yeah, and I think even more so in the Iggy remix of it. You can hear that more. But yeah. And I actually downloaded years ago. There's a cool compilation called No Thanks, and it's basically like an introduction to punk music and kind of a retrospective of punk. And this track is on there as like one of those initial punk songs, you know.
Well, you can understand why for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think this is just like the perfect way to start the album, but then going into the second song, Gimme Danger, dude, it just such a great contrast because it starts with the acoustic guitar and like tambourine, and that is about as far away.
Piano hits. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like the little piano is right. And I was just like, when I heard that, like I was like, okay, Search and Destroy is badass. But then when I heard it transition into Gimme Danger, my respect just went up like 10.
Oh yeah,
because it's like, wow, dude. Okay, we're doing something different here, and as consistent as I would say this album is, there are like these little nuggets here and there that really stand out and make it stand out from other kind of albums and even itself of the other songs on the album.
Well, and one thing I'll say about Gimme Danger that I noticed, but I didn't really know how, and it kind of goes back to the recording part, is that is how they have that nice echo. It's like a stereo echo on the acoustic guitar.
Okay. And
so one of the things is, I guess there was this thing called a time cube. And and Iggy, the bong. I think it was Iggy Pop, described it as basically looking like a bong with a couple of twists and turns, and you would actually feed the sound through it, and it would come out the other side with this really nice echo, and that's what they used. And I thought that was interesting, because even if that was high tech at the time, I mean, by today's standards, that is like incredibly primitive, but the result is amazing.
All right. No,
and I've always loved the song. I mean, some of the Nothing in My Dreams, just some ugly memories, and Nothing Left Alive, just a pair of glassy eyes. Like, just the lyrics they really cut in this one. I feel like.
Right. Oh yeah, dude. This is definitely one of my favorite songs. It might be my favorite song in the album, to be honest with you. It's hard because there's a couple. But yeah, I totally dig this one a lot.
And just the riff itself is a great riff.
It really is. It really, really is. Want to move on to track 3 here, Ren,
yeah,
Tim?
Yep. Your pretty face is going to hell.
Face is going to hell. All right, yeah.
I mean, it's pretty rough, and it comes in rough too. I mean, that's one of the ones that I think was recorded probably in that session where they ended up with 3 tracks, because it's really abrupt in its in its entry and the way it comes in.
Yeah, everything about this song is like the guitar, it screeches, it's just driving like crazy. And when he comes in and just starts singing, he sings it like real aggressively, distortion on his voice, man. Like, to me, it's just like, again, it just kicks you in the balls pretty much. And it's pretty great, man. And to me, again, this is where I kind of, I don't know, maybe I go back and forth, and I fully probably need to listen to more punk. But when I hear this, I'm like, oh my God, this is just like hardcore rock. I mean, I wouldn't say it's thrash metal, but it's just this it's this hardcore rock, man.
And harder than anything out at the time. Because even if you consider like Black Sabbath's first album, which would have been out around the same time, that was like the first metal album, if you will. I mean, this was just different. It may not have had the thickness, but it wasn't slow. It was really fast, and it just,
It's punches, man. Punches.
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
It does.
All right. Track number 4, dude. Penetration.
Yeah.
Okay. So, dude, is that a Hammond organ?
No.
What is it?
I don't believe it is.
Because it sounds like Riders on the Storm to me. Like,
well, but that's a Rhodes. The Riders on the Storm is a Rhodes electric piano. I don't know. I don't know if it's a Rhodes. I've kind of been torn between thinking it's one of the early iterations of the Wurlitzer piano, like either a 122 or a 140, or something called a Horner pianette, which kind of has an electric piano sound, but just a little different. Because the only reason I would say probably not a Rhodes, which it could be, and I feel like an idiot, but I just don't think it has the thickness of the Rhodes.
Okay.
But that also could have been the way it was recorded. So I honestly, I don't know, but some sort of an electric piano instrument for sure.
Yeah. Well, and again, what I just love about it is when I was listening to this, I was not expecting to hear that sound.
Yeah.
Just wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's so, they don't get, I don't think, overly complex on it. It kind of stays very consistent throughout the song. but man, I love that sound, and it's such a good contrast, man.
I agree.
It's really great.
And if you do like that sound, I would advise you to listen to that disc that I talked about, because whoever was playing that, they do more of that in what would have or what was to come in those recordings. There's either acoustic piano or there's that instrument. And then the reason I thought it was a Wurlitzer was because in those recordings that I listened to, the live ones, it sounded more like a Wurlitzer to me. But
okay, cool.
That's the dork talking.
Yeah, right. Well, I also really like the way he kind of sings this song. It has this creepy kind of dirty feel to it. Like,
yeah,
I kind of like it's kind of seductive, but it's almost like Jack the Ripper seducing you a little bit. Like, it's got that weird kind of like, I don't know if I should like this guy or not. Like, you know,
but different. I mean, nonetheless, it's different. You know,
and then he just makes like kind of weird cat noises too. I don't know what that's about, but hey, man, it works, dude. It works, Iggy. Keep it up.
I imagine those live shows must have been amazing, because there's some of them where, like, if you listen to some of their live stuff, you can hear him like starting shit with the audience, and like, you know, he'd cut himself and rub peanut butter on himself, like, dude, like crazy shit.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to believe he was addicted to heroin. Yeah. So let's flip the record and let's talk about the self-titled track, Raw Power.
Raw Power.
Yeah, I mean, again, to me, this is just, it's like a great, just kind of straightforward rock punk song. And I think it was the, one of the, what would you say? Somebody at the record company, wanted them to have like 2 ballads on each side and kind of like start off each side like that. Did you read that at all?
I did read something about that. I don't know that I would put this one as the ballad. Maybe the next track, I Need Somebody, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think they wanted kind of I don't know if you'd say this is radio friendly, more like the singles, or what would be kind of like the hit. And they were just like, well, we're going to, you know, each side should start with like that type of track. And this one did come out as, I believe, the 3rd single. I think it's the actual main single that was released in Japan, but but I think it might be
the 3rd single, yeah.
3rd single that was released. Yeah, but I mean, the song, dude, itself, dude, it's raw, it's grungy, just as you would expect, and it's a great way to, you know, kind of start the second side of the album. And
yeah, it's great word painting. Because the being what the title is, it sounds like Raw Power, you know? Yeah.
Well, one thing that's kind of cool with this album, I would say, is that, you know, we talk a lot about albums and listening to songs in order, and we like all that kind of shit. I feel like, dude, like with this album, it didn't really matter what side you start with. You could just kind of put it on, and it's like, okay, cool. I mean, that's just how I feel about it.
No, I don't think that's unfounded, because then go to the next track, I Need Somebody, and it's kind of more, it's at least more like the second song on the first side.
It is.
Give Me Danger. I mean, like, you can hear acoustic in it, and, you know, it's just got a slower tempo, and he sings it a little different, where he does it like you.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like a crooner sometimes.
It is. Yeah. The song just kind of, it kind of chugs along. And again, he kind of, you know, sings it, I would say more in a little bit of a creepier manner. But
yeah. But I think chugs along is a good, it does chug. It does.
Yeah. Yeah. When, and during the documentary, the little snippets that I watched, they were playing an acoustic version of it. And Iggy's at the Iggy's at the mixing board, and he's like, yeah, you know, this right now, he's like, it really sounds like a whorehouse, like a bordello from New Orleans. Like he's like, it sounds like that's what would be playing on the inside of it. I mean, dude, that's pretty badass. If that's how you're describing your own song, like, I mean, have you ever written a song like that? Because if you haven't, I think you need to try.
No, I haven't.
I know it's not really your style, but
but you know,
you are going glacial.
Well, I will say, in the music bed that we're using for this is a song that I wrote called I Want It All, and it is absolutely influenced by Iggy and the Stooges, and this album specifically. So if the episode isn't too long, I'll play the whole thing at the end because I feel like it's somewhere between this and like 90s rock if they met.
Sweet.
And it's heavy, and I made everything real nasty and, gritty. And
I know.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it dirty.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, number
Shake
7.
Appeal.
Shake Appeal. All right. So, the dude, this I'm excited to talk about.
Okay. All right.
So I was listening to this. I mean, I had heard it, a bunch and everything. And it really, there's a song. I'm like, gosh, this really reminds me of something and which is weird because I don't listen to a lot of music like this. And I'm like, what is it? And not only the beat in the riff, but also his, I guess the pattern in which he sings it. And this last time I listened to it before we did this episode, it clicked. And it really reminds me, you just need to do this. I don't think you can do it right now. And maybe the listeners do it. And tell me I'm wrong. The Beatles rock and roll music. Like, put that song on, listen to it, the first 30 seconds, and then play the first 30 seconds of this. And just the kind of the beat and the way it bounces, and then the way he sings it, the vocal pattern. Like, obviously the Beatles doesn't have the distortion.
Yeah.
But man, if you listen to the first little bit of each song, I was like, holy shit. Like, dude, it's the weirdest thing, man. It's the weirdest thing.
I'm not gonna discredit that. I want to, because in my head I can kind of hear it. You know what I thought you were gonna say?
No.
It was fucking "Rocks Off" by the Rolling Stones.
Ooh,
that's what I thought you were gonna say.
Oh, okay.
I really thought but dude, that rock and roll music makes sense. Like, I get that.
Yeah, man, I hear that too, though. I agree. Wow. Oh,
interesting,
dude.
Now, one thing, if you like Shake Appeal, to go back, and you're going to love this, but to go back to those recordings that would have been the next album.
Yes. Right.
There is a song on there called "Cock in My Pocket," and it is very much in the same kind of feeling and way as Shake Appeal.
Cock
so I think you'd like it. If you like a Shake Appeal, dude, "Cock in My Pocket" is for you.
Dude, there's got to be like please tell me there's a sex toy called like "Cock in My Pocket." There's got to be.
There should be.
Here, go to Extreme Restraints. Let's find it. No, I'm just kidding. All right, moving on. Track number 8, dude, "Death Trip." Longest song on the album, over 6 minutes. I find that I think this song really wraps up the album well. It has a lot of rock distortion. To me, this I know you said "Search and Destroy" and how punky that is. To me, I find that this is the punkiest song on the album, at least the way he sings it, because I find it's a little lazy. It's more freeform, and he doesn't try to make any melody. And at least the punk that I've heard, it kind of has that feel to it. So that's why, for me, I almost say this is the punkiest. Depends on what punk
you're listening to, but
it depends on what punk you're listening to.
I understand what you're saying, and I certainly don't disagree with that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I like what you said about like the delivery as being a little more lackadaisical, because I think that's very true. I mean, "Search and Destroy" is incredibly deliberate, and this one he has room to kind of mess with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's just kind of what I noticed with this one. Let It Loose. Oh, that's a fucking good song, dude.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that album.
Please, like tomorrow. Like, I'm ready.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not, because I need to make my notes. But all right, Grim. Is it my turn? Your turn? Whose turn? Who did Run the Jewels first?
I feel like you did.
Okay.
Or no. I think I did, because I thought we were going to scratch the same one, and you surprised me with something different.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. 2 Chainz. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, all right, dude. So it's my turn. Or my turn?
Yeah.
My turn. Okay. So I am just going to go ahead. I'm not going to waste anybody's time here, but I'm going to go ahead and I am going to scratch Death Trip. Because The first 6 songs in this album I love. I like all those songs. I dig them. Shake Appeal, I was a little bit on the fence. But once I made the connection kind of for myself with rock and roll music, that is a reason for me to keep it. But with Death Trip, it's over 6 minutes, and I do like it. I think it is, like I said earlier, the punkiest song in the album. But personally, I don't know if it needs to be kind of that long. So that's where I'm cutting it. Just,
honestly, dude, I really thought there was a chance to go to overtime on this one, but that wasn't my cut. And I think you said it perfectly when you were talking about it, that Death Trip rounds out the album really well. And although it was a possibility for me, I really have to go with Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell.
Oh, okay.
Not that I don't like the song, but it's like, it's hard for me because after Gimme Danger, it is very abrupt. And if it did go right into Penetration, like,
which would make sense,
I would accept that penetration.
Yeah. Now, yes, absolutely. If we did, I can definitely see that. I do kind of like how it goes. Search and Destroy is much harder. Gimme Danger chills a bit. The up and down. Like any good album.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised we actually didn't go to overtime on this one. It's tough with a 40 minute, not a 40 minute, 8 song
33
album.
minute.
That's 33 minutes. Like, I mean, this is EP territory. You take one song off, which is a scratch, and that's your EP, man.
Dude, yeah, I know, because I would listen to this when I would go for my run, and the album would be done and it would start on like the legacy, because you download a few different iterations and it would start over again. And I was like, man, I don't know. Am I going that fast, or is it just, and I'm not going that fast. So.
Right. Totally. Yeah, no, it's a quick album. It's a quick listen.
Yeah,
so,
but a good one.
I'd highly recommend that if you're not familiar with it or haven't listened to it, like, give it a shot and, do it while you're exercising or something, just anything, because it's really upbeat and it's a quick listen. So it's not like, honestly, hey, I'm gonna waste an hour of my time or something.
Yeah. And if you like it, don't stop there. Check out Metallic KO, or there's another version called Metallic 2KO, but all those tracks that are the best ones from that era are also on something I believe called More Power. So check those out, because where they were going to go was awesome too. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way.
It didn't happen. So, oh well.
And watch the Gimme Danger documentary. There's a lot of excellent information in that, and it's entertaining. And one thing I really like, one of many things that I really like about it, is you see after so many years, like, Iggy reignite with the Ashton brothers before, unfortunately, I believe the drummer passed away.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Know that.
But it's cool. I mean, it's interesting to see their journey, because it's a weird one. It's like a band that made it, but kind of didn't, they made it enough to record albums, but they never like broke through to superstardom or anything. I mean, they just kind of, but then ended up, consequently being one of the most influential bands in music. So it's interesting because
they are one of those bands that, maybe they didn't have that breakthrough like we talk about with some of the, the big iconic bands, but they have their niche, man. Like,
they do.
Their fans, their followers, and they are loyal, and they're good, good solid fans who really are into this band. They are, for sure. Oh,
and the previous 2 albums are awesome too in their own right, and very different. I mean, the self-titled Stooges album has elements of this, but it's more what you would have expected, because I think it came out in 1969. There's a song on there called 1969. And then Funhouse is like different, because it's almost like there's elements of like free jazz, and there's like horns and stuff in there.
Freeform Jazz Odyssey.
mixed with like punk predecessor. Yeah, it's interesting, but I'd recommend all of them. I mean, a cool band to listen to.
Cool.
Great band. Underrated band.
All right. Well, Graham, I think we can mark Iggy and the Stooges Raw Power officially scratched. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We hope you're still with us, and we got many more to come. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday with probably another covers face-off. So get ready for that. Until next time, please like, please subscribe, please comment. Let us know what you think. What would you scratch?
Scratch a Track is produced by the Dude and Grim. Additional music provided by More. That's ... MORE. And the Tims, TIMNZ. Copyright 2020. The Dude and Grim Show. I won't discriminate how great or how small. I want it all. Don't bother asking how much is enough. I'll show you where to stick it when the going gets rough. My face hurts from laughter. I'm having a ball. I want it all. I'll take what's mine until I get what I'm due. Nothing, I was born to succeed. Eating the ripest fruit, you're planting the seeds. If you're getting too close, I'll build up a wall. I want it all. Just keep pretending this will be gone in a flash. You got no opinions, cause you ain't got the cash. In my golden parachute, so gently I fall. I want it all.